People have been asking for a Canadian election update, and there's a lot to update. When this whole thing started, I thought it was basically going to be a nothing burger, that maybe some of the parties were going to gain a couple seats, maybe lose a couple, but the overall political situation wouldn't be changed. It would be another liberal minority government, and it would just basically be the status quo. Now, that still may very well happen, and I still personally think that's probably what's going to happen. But over the last week or so, it looks like that things are moving in a slightly different direction. The Conservatives have been surging, and the Liberals have been declining quite a bit. Now, the actual popular vote percentage is pretty much irrelevant. That hasn't really changed since last time. It's more important where the shifts have happened throughout the country. As I've said in the past, Canada has a first past the post electoral system, so you're rewarded for having relatively high levels of support over a large area. Because whether you win a particular riding by 1% or 60%, you get one seat either way. Whether the Conservatives win every seat in Alberta with 36% of the popular vote or 90% of the popular vote, it doesn't affect the overall electoral map. So while the overall percentage of the popular vote hasn't really changed at all since last time, it has moved around a lot on the ground. The Conservatives have made some pickups in some rather important areas, and while they've lost a lot of support in certain areas, there are areas where it's completely irrelevant if they lose support in. Oh wow, they're down 10% in Alberta. They're only going to get like 55% of the vote in Alberta instead of 70%. Perish the thought. It's not really going to affect election math much, but if the Conservatives pick up 2 or 3 percentage points in Ontario, that can translate into a dozen seats. That's a big deal. Now, why is this happening? Unfortunately for Justin, he called this election literally like a day or two before Afghanistan happened. He called this election, and then Canada's 20-year-long peacekeeping project that we had constantly patted ourselves on the back about, that was like this big liberal government success. It completely imploded. It fell apart, and it was an embarrassment. And then Justin Virtue Signal was like, "We're going to take all these people in." I don't know how many of the people we actually got, but I don't think it was the full amount or anywhere near the full amount. So you had the same kind of embarrassing that happened with Biden, but Biden's not up for re-election for another couple of years. So that will be swept under the rug long since then. But for Justin, you still have the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan happening while the election started. So it looks really, really bad. You also have in much of Canada, COVID lockdowns are still pretty much in full swing. Now they haven't actually locked down. It's kind of confusing. Okay, so for people who live in the United States, it's a lot of provinces, I think BC, British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec still have mask mandates and will have mask mandates for the foreseeable future. I think British Columbia didn't have them, but they brought them back. Most provinces are bringing in vaccine passports. Ontario is, British Columbia is, Quebec is. There are also a lot of provinces are preventing people from traveling to the province unless they provide proof of vaccination. And the whole thing just looks like it's not going to end anytime soon. And Justin's been very pro vaccine passport. And he said that he's going to force all members of the federal public service to get vaccinated. They're going to try to prevent people from flying or taking trains or stuff unless they get vaccinated. That sort of thing. So people don't like that. It's this very schizo, bipolar, bizarro thing with regards to how people feel about COVID. Because on one hand, you'll have people screaming for the death of those who don't get vaccinated and crying for COVID passports. But on the other hand, they'll be like, okay, it's okay if you need a COVID vaccine passport to buy food at the grocery store. But if you're going to stop me from going to Florida without a COVID vaccine passport, that's just too far. And it's really hard to tell just where the public's opinion is on the whole thing. it's pretty schizo, to put it mildly. Generally speaking, though, I think people are not very happy with the job that Justin's been doing. There's been massive amounts of public spending. He's really just kind of tried to micromanage things, inserted himself into a lot of provincial and local politics. And it's still going, and COVID's still going on, and people want it to be over. And his whole campaign is about, look how well I handled COVID, when for the most part he didn't handle COVID well. I mean, he refused to close the border. The vaccine was a disaster because various Canadian governments had shipped all our vaccine production overseas. They gave away, I think, a bunch of PPE early on. You had the whole We Help Charity or whatever it was scandal. Basically, it's been something of a mess for the most part. Granted, I don't know if anyone really, you could say, handled this whole thing particularly well, but Justin is running on a very mixed record, bringing up a period of time that people really don't want to think about anymore, which is not a winning strategy, to put it mildly. I think there's also the issue where during wartime, support for the incumbent government will often go up a lot because of national unity. But after that, they'll often lose a lot of support, and you'll have a change in government immediately following a war. This happened in Britain, the United States. I don't think it did in Canada, but it happened in a lot of countries immediately post World War II and immediately post World War One. And theoretically, we're in a bit of a lull in terms of how bad the pandemic is. I mean, the restrictions are just as bad as ever, pretty much, but not that many people are theoretically dying anymore. So there's just a desire to have some fresh air and to just kind of have a changeover. A lot of people also think that it's really tacky to call a snap election during a pandemic, and to kind of try to take advantage of the situation to get a majority government. A lot of people felt that he should have waited till this thing was over. Although, to be fair, it's not. I don't know if it's ever going to be over. But a lot of people just think it's cynical. A lot of people think Trudeau's an asshole. They think he doesn't care about them. They think that he's a complete just dipshit. And Erin O'Toole has that like safe milk toast dad vibe. He's kind of like the guy who comes in and goes, "Are you winning, son?" And is just like the most bland, generic, ambient tier conservative leader ever. I couldn't even like watch the conservative leadership race. It was so bad. I mean, I voted for Base Black Lady and Derek Sloan. I don't think I put Erin O'Toole or Peter MacKay down. Maybe I put Erin O'Toole as my third, just because he was not going to expel everyone who is pro-life from the party. But I completely digress. But yeah, you have a choice between your pot-smoking, beret-wearing uncle who comes in and lectures you and borrows money from your parents to buy cigarettes. And then you have boring old Prime Minister Dad, and I guess people just want Prime Minister Dad now. Now, before we get into this a bit more, I just like to say, to hold myself accountable, I'm not voting for the Conservatives this time. I refuse. I'm not going to hold my nose again and vote for them, because I can't do it anymore. My new policy towards voting is free, so you should probably vote. If a major party is going to do something that is actually important, then you should go out and support them, even if they otherwise suck. Like, a lot of the Republican parties suck, but if you're in a state where they're trying to do something useful, like pass anti-social media censorship laws, or stuff like that, then you should probably go out and support them. But you shouldn't give a fake center-right or a fake conservative party your vote solely because they're not the other guy. Screw that. That's partially what got us into this whole problem. Don't give them your vote. I'm going to vote for the People's Party of Canada. They're not going to win any seats. It's throwing my vote away. But they support, their anti-censorship, their anti-vaccine passport, as far as I can determine, and they're substantially better than the other choices. Once again, they're not going to win any seats. They're not going to win, but voting's a free action, and it was just something that was drilled into. So if we look at the breakdown here, we'll see that it's pretty much what happened last time. The Conservatives won the national vote in the previous election by like 1%, but the Liberals still won the most seats. That's because, like I said, the Conservatives win an inordinate amount of votes in the prairies in Alberta, which don't really translate into any more seats because it's just overkill. Whereas the Liberals' support is a lot more spread out. I mean, as you can even see here, they get good support in Atlantic Canada, Quebec, Ontario, BC, and some in the prairies. Whereas the Conservatives is much more. Oh no, this was last time. Conservatives is much more regional to Western Canada. But Ontario is like neck and neck now, so that translates into a lot. So if we look at the voter shift, the Liberals have picked up in the NDP. So the other part, yeah, the Liberals and the NDP have picked up support in the prairie provinces in Alberta, which is completely irrelevant. It'll probably translate into like one seat, but they've lost a lot of support in Ontario, and that's really going to hit them because there's a lot of swing ridings in Ontario. Just because there's a lot of suburbs in Ontario, and the suburbs tend to swing between the Liberals and the Conservatives based on the election. And Ontario's like 40%, I think, of Canada's population. So that's basically where the election is going to be won and lost. The Green Party is completely collapsed. I'm not really sure the reason for it is. It could be that Canadians are racists and they don't want a black Jewish woman to lead the country. I don't know. Other than that, though, it seems like the NDP's picked up a bit of steam, but they're going to remain irrelevant as they always are. So let's take a peek at the seat shift. So pretty much everything's going to come down. Well, it looks like everything's more or less going to come down to the Atlantic and Ontario. The Conservatives, I think, won an election in Nova Scotia, provincial election a week or so ago, or a month or so ago, and that seems to have been helping them out quite a bit. So there has been a shift on the East Coast. Also, Erin O'Toole's a like milk toast red Tory, so that helps him out there. It probably helps him out in Ontario a bit. I don't really know what Doug Ford's popularity is these days. As far as I'm concerned, all the provincial parties suck. I'm not going to vote for the PCs again this time. I don't know who I'll vote for. If the Trillium Party or the Family Coalition or like some third party is running in my riding, maybe I'll vote for them. But fuck it, I refuse to vote for Doug Ford again after he sold us out last time. But yeah, there's been a big shift. The Conservatives look like they're going to pick up about 20 seats. The NDP are going to pick up about 10. The only reason the Liberals aren't like doing much worse is the BQ is not doing well, so the Liberals are picking up a couple seats in Quebec. But it looks like it's just going to be a conservative minority government. Now, who actually will form government is an interesting question. I can't really recall a time where it's been that close between the two major parties. Where even where there's a minority government, one party didn't clearly win in terms of seat count, especially since the Liberals are the incumbent party. Coalitions are something that just don't really happen in Canadian politics. So the Liberal Party theoretically could form a coalition, or at least have a confidence and supply agreement with the NDP, but I honestly just don't think that's going to happen. So we're just going to have another liberal minority government or a conservative minority government that's going to limp along for a couple of years and not really do anything. Now, to me, that's good because most of the stuff what they do sucks. So if they're not going to do anything in power, that's probably the best case scenario. Um, I'm kind of in a weird position, or I guess rather a third position, where I don't really agree with the Conservative Party on most economic or environmental issues. I just traditionally vote for them, even though they are a socially liberal left wing party on cultural, social issues, and that sort of thing. Is they're not as radical as the liberals and the NDP are, so I normally would vote for them just on those grounds. And because taxes are too high in Canada and public spending does need to be cut, but they don't cut public spending, they just kind of cut taxes and then increase the debt. But they're slightly less bad on some issues, so I tend to vote for them. Realistically, if you were to take out social issues which don't exist, I'd probably on a lot of issues be closer to the Liberals, NDP, or Green Party than I would to the Conservative Party. If it's on something like labor or the environment or that sort of thing. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the update video. God bless, and we'll talk more later.